with me Bas van Abel, the founder of Fairphone and a well-known entrepreneur, social entrepreneur. And just thanks so much, Bas, for being so generous and being today with us, reflecting on how we can do it better on innovation and businesses and sustainability after this virus that actually crashed into us. I would ask you first, how do you think this situation we are living in is going to impact in business and entrepreneurs regarding the sustainability strategies and plans? Do you think that this is going to stop everything a bit, or is this going to be a lever to go even quicker towards our objectives, our SDGs?
Yeah. So on the question of how is it going to impact post-corona social enterprises and companies that are actually impact driven, what you see with I'm in startups, so startups and scale-ups, new companies that have been set up also to challenge the system. So in that sense, for me, not so much changes. It also, one of the things that you see is that it makes it feels even that my work actually becomes more important. For the reason that one of the things I've been working on quite a lot with Fairphone, but also with my new venture that's more focused on local circular ecosystems, is that relationships and even if it's global or local, but relationships and our relation towards the supply chains are becoming more and more important. People want to get more view on what's actually happening behind the scenes, and we see now with Corona, actually with COVID, much more clearly what is happening behind the scenes and how China relates, how close it is to what we're doing here. With Fairphone, we've been actually working on that. How do you make it visible to people that what's happening in China, what's happening in Africa, also regarding stuff that we take out of the ground, minerals, has a relationship with what we're doing here. So I think in a way it also it shows how much connected we are. It also exposes the fragility of globalization a bit. I wouldn't say that we have to go back to our autarkic systems and do things ourselves, because consumerism has democratized a lot of things as well. What we have now is at our availability is much more than we had than the Queen of England had in back in the days. You go several centuries back. So I think for the work that we're doing regarding making that we're not in an economic system purely to squeeze out even the last bit of efficiency to make an extra buck. I think this might actually help to realize that might not be the most important thing to do, and that there's also other important things at stake, continuity of food systems.
Yeah, so in a way, as you say, this should be like a wake-up call, no, about the fragility and the vulnerability, no, of this strategy of the supply chain, of management in the supply chain, where we've been acting only on costs, no? So how would you think that companies could do better in supply chain? Which would you say would be the pillars for a new beginning, let's say, in supply chain? Many people are speaking about this balance of global and local, no? Which would you say are the first steps, or the pillars of this new way of doing in supply chain? Because you know a lot about that, Bas.
Yeah, I think one of the things that also becomes more and more clear. I think the you might call it a good thing, bad thing, whatever. But what the whole situation now does is it it goes back to the question of what's essential and what is excess. You know, it's excess versus essential. We have so much stuff that we don't need. On the other hand, there's also a lot of people in the world that miss essential stuff. What becomes very clear now is that that there's also, you know, the inequalities that we have around the world are I mean, it is, you know, they call it the virus. Basically is there for everyone. You know, nobody can hide from it. But in the end, it's not like that.
Yeah.
You know, you see that the inequalities that we have around the world actually become more clear, and that people that don't have a lot actually are suffering even more than the people that have a lot. And that goes also in the countries. And I think one of the things for me that would be really key towards the future is that we embrace also the public-private discussion even more. That we really look at how governments, you know, the role of governments, where we back in the 70s, 80s, you know, the people that basically are the CEOs of now are the ones that in the 90s were the ones that privatized all these things. And these are the guys, mainly guys, that are running the big businesses and have been taught that you can't trust the government. And I think that towards the future, we really have to make sure that that the government works on making possible that we can trust them, and that companies also take that as a chance and embrace that public-private kind of not the discussion, but also the public-private activities that we can develop, because supply chains have to do also with national interest. You know, you see how people actually how they reply now to, you know, head of states to the whole situation. You know, there's a lot of good things to be said, but it also shows, you know, that we have mentally kind of disabled head of states at the moment. I would say that are mentally not prepared, I think, for this kind of thinking. And for me, it is really important that happens. But one of the most important things also is that we become aware of the fact that you cannot disconnect ecology, sustainability, as a lot of people see sustainability still, from the social inequality. It is impossible for people who have nothing, who do not have the essentials, to tell them stop using excess stuff.
Bas, in this context that you are showing us, the most vulnerable at the business levels are the smallest, no? So when we speak about vulnerable communities that are working with us in our supply chains, do you think they can suffer because of all this crisis, because of all this back to local in a way? Which actions should be taken by companies, by businesses, to ensure that resilience of those most vulnerable communities? How can we do better in reinforcing partnerships with these guys so they are not affected by this whole situation? No, you have a lot of experience.
Yeah. Well, you can start with paying your taxes.
That helps.
Yeah. So if you really pay your taxes, as every other small company is doing, and you stop really, you know, like we're talking about multinationals here, right? So if multinationals really, you know, look at this fair taxing, they can really support the government with that, and the government basically is there to protect also the interest of the public, right? Of the commons. So we have mechanisms to protect the interest of the commons. You can do it yourself, but when you're a company and you really want to be doing something towards the vulnerable, look at your own supply chains, look at your own business. Don't set up a charity on the one hand where you put part of your profits in to do all kinds of good stuff around the world if you still have a shitty supply chain. Look at, you know, what is it that I can do in my supply chain, in my business, towards my people, in my company, and work on that. instead of still going for the highest profits and then do something good with the profits you make. One of the problems that we see with companies that want to get into system change, a lot of the companies that are going into system change are driving against are basically sailing against a tide, right? They're rowing against a tide. So they're still trapped in an old economic system that they want to change. So they kind of have to, they're dictated by all these rules that are out there. That drive for profits, drive for all these old economic rules, and within that system, they're even trying to change that. So you're basically trying to change the system that you also have to adhere to, and that is one of the biggest challenges of social enterprises. System change in the end, system change. You can't just say, well, stop this system, start a new one. You have to do that from the system you're in. So I think. One of the things that big companies really can do is they can start supporting, and they can do that by becoming customers, right? They can start by supporting these social enterprises and these smaller companies that have a vision and that have been set up in the core of the company to drive this economic change. They can start supporting them with economic commercial deals, by procurement, and the government can do that. So I think we're all consumers. Even companies are consumers. So with that, with that buying power, you can actually also show, basically put your money where your mouth is.
How do you think this transparency demand is going to evolve? No, the supply chain is actually something that is becoming obvious for everybody. No, the problems behind it. No, what do you think? I mean, how is this going to evolve, consumer-wise, citizen-wise, and how we can do better in transparency as companies? What is the future of transparency for you, Paz?
Well, transparency for me is a means to an end. It's not a goal in itself. There are a lot of bad examples of transparency where things are just put out in the open without giving it context, without supporting people in the questions that they have around it. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like open source, like I said before. If open source is you have rules around it. It's not just if I make a piece of software, I just dump it into a community and say, guys, this is the software, have fun with it. People have questions and they want to engage and they want to have interaction. So I think with transparency comes out the duty of contextualizing and also of having a discussion around it with the goal of actually building more trust. Being able to engage with something and to you don't have to control that whole system. It's a trust mechanism for me, transparency. Mm-hmm. And if it raises more questions than it actually answers things, then you shouldn't consider putting everything out in the open. There's also an element to it that I think transparency also helps companies to be able. And that is basically surfacing that dark matter, the stuff you don't see. Like I said, the more you are able to actually show the stuff you don't see and also your dilemmas that you're dealing with, the more people will start trusting you, but also understanding you and then trusting you with the things that you are doing as a company. And social media is helping with that. But on the other hand, there's also really bad examples of how technology and tracking and tracing is used in marketing purposes. Yeah, so there's always that balance of, okay, all that transparency and everything I'd share with everyone, how much harm is it going to do to me if people use that data against me? And that also is for companies. Companies, if you start sharing data, you also have to keep that into mind. It's not different from the privacy and and individuals.